podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Salah. Escape Cancelo. Oh, it's brilliant from Mo Salah. And still, Salah. Oh, sensational! Son had a goal and scored a beauty.
Oh, what a strike from Yuri Tielemans.
De Bruyne.
And it is Ward-Prowse. Martinelli, gorgeous.
Still Gallagher.
Oh, he's done it again.
And City have won the Premier League.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, EPL Index proudly brings to you the best prediction podcast in the world, A Tad Predictable, with your host, Tiriwa Chanakira, and his guest, Aston Villa's own, James Billingham.
It's GameWeek 27, and you know what that means. It's time for another brand new episode of A Tad Predictable. Well, Carabao Cup is over. FA Cup is coming up this week, but we are going to be predicting the Premier League fixtures for this coming game week. I've got my guest, Aston Villa fan, James Billingham, as you heard in the guest intros. James, welcome back to the show, and what are your thoughts on the Carabao Cup?
It's great to be back. Thanks for having me on again. I thought it was quite a good game, and I was at the pub with my mates, and we said that usually extra time's quite disappointing these days. But it was pretty good to watch, to be honest. I always backed Liverpool to win that, but then with more injuries coming for them, I thought it was a really, really key win for them to get under their belt this early in the season. So yeah, but overall, it was a good game.
Yeah, it's usually the trophy where if you win it, you celebrate it like it's the Champions League. If you lose it, you say, "Oh, it's the Mickey Mouse Trophy." We didn't want it anyway. But it appeared as though Poch really wanted that one, especially with as you said, with the Liverpool injuries that they had. It was definitely a case of missed opportunity, I think, for Chelsea. Poch, a chance to get his first trophy in the UK. Just, yeah, I guess disappointment for them, and we'll see how that affects their FA Cup, I guess, against Leeds, but then also specifically their Premier League form going forward.
Yeah, the thing that surprised me most to think about that game was when it came to extra time, and Liverpool have got all these inexperienced players playing, and Chelsea, Pochettino seemed to take the impetus away from themselves and just tried to soak up a bit of pressure. And I thought, I know that they're a young team as well, but they've got more starters in that side, and you'd think that they'd take the game to them. They had enough chances in the game as well to score, but I think this has been the problem in general, hasn't it? They can't put so many of their chances away, and that's what's costing them. So it was another case of that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Kelleher had a phenomenal game. But Chelsea should have won that game based on the chances that both teams had. But let's move on to the Premier League. And I started with that Carabao Cup final because Chelsea are the 12:30 kickoff. They will be travelling to Brentford, so not too far. They don't have to go too far for that game. But what shape did Chelsea come into this game? I know the FA Cup will probably play a factor in that as well. But coming up against a Brentford side who we obviously know Brentford, they play tonight at time of recording, just to peel behind the scenes here. And I'm assuming you're watching because I can see you've got one eye on the side of the screen. I'm in a similar situation with you there. But yeah, what do you make of this game? What kind of Chelsea arrives to face Brentford, and how will Brentford fare against that?
It's hard to say with Chelsea, I think. They can turn up on the day and be really good. I think they've started to look better in the second half of the season, definitely. But as I was just saying, that putting the chances away is still a problem for them. And then you think about this cup final will have really hurt them, and then it can go either way, can't it? It can knock them back down again, or it can just reinvigorate them in wanting to prove a point. Because especially the likes of that key quote from Neville, the blue £1 billion bottle jobs. I think that could be something that they want to try and get revenge on. And I think if they turn up and be as good as we've seen them at times this season, I think they could win. But Brentford at home is is not an easy task. I think that Brentford's problem at the moment, especially watching this game so far, is that defensively so poor. They still have some good pieces of play in general, but they lose the man way too often. And I think if Chelsea can drag them about, they could score one or two. But I think it'll still be a close scoreline. I'd probably say Chelsea 2-1.
Yeah, Chelsea 2-1 seems to be a decent score prediction, especially when you consider, I would have thought Brentford would be targeting this game against West Ham, looking at how tough their fixture list has been in recent weeks, and with the looming Chelsea game coming up. You want to at least get that win against West Ham, a West Ham side that's not been playing well at the moment, so much so that David Moyes' contract talks got stalled. And at least give yourself some breathing room with that relegation zone. But they're starting to get dragged into that relegation battle. And as is custom in the Premier League, once you're in that zone, it's really tough to drag yourself out of it and push away from it. So, they're going to need to start picking up wins somewhere. I'm not going to give them a win in this one against Chelsea. I think it will be tough for Pochettino to get the team re-energized, refocused on getting results in the Premier League. I think the players might be more focused for the FA Cup game personally, because that's still a trophy that they can win. Premier League, I don't think even the boldest Chelsea fans will be predicting them winning it. Maybe Champions League if they can go on a mega run, but even that seems quite far-fetched at the moment. So I think they'll be focused for the FA Cup. I'm not sure they're going to be as motivated for this Brentford game. I've gone with the 1-1 draw. I've taken into account the troubles Chelsea have had in front of goal. Brentford still make games difficult, even though they haven't been winning any in recent history. So I think it's going to be another draw for Brentford. And I guess as we're looking at it, it's 2-1 to West Ham in the current game. So they've got some points to make up if that scoreline stays the same and as it is. But let's move on to our next game. The aforementioned West Ham. They will travel to Goodison Park against probably a rejuvenated Everton, considering the news that came out today. Then their 9-point deduction, has now been dropped to 6 points. A bit more palatable maybe for them?
Yeah, definitely would be. It's shot them up the table quite a bit already. 4 points is massive when you're in that position. So I think I was on the same page. A lot of people waiting for this outcome that you expect it to not change. I think not changing was much better than getting worse. So to have 4 points rescinded away from it, that's even better. So I think coming into this weekend at Goodison, there should be a really good feeling about that. I can't see past an Everton win this weekend, to be honest. I think they still have their frailties, and conceding late the other day would have really annoyed them. But they're not that bad defensively. They're decent, and I think with West Ham struggles, they're really up and down. I could see a 1-0 Everton win, probably from another sort of maybe even another centre back goal. I think set pieces and things like that can be really key for them. So, but yeah, I'd probably say 1-0 Everton.
Yeah, that's a decent shot. And when you watched Everton versus Brighton, the defensive shape for Everton is bang on. If they could finish, they would be a lot higher up in the league table. I think Sean Dyche has done really well to stabilise that defensive side for them, because they were leaking a lot of goals before he came in, and he's done well. Now it's just about, can we find someone to put them in the back of the net for us? I had screaming in my ear that it's 10 points, not 9 points, that they had been deducted 10 points. It's gone down to 6. To me, punishments are always, maybe looking from a philosophical standpoint, but punishments are one, obviously, or the sentencing, should I say, or the points deduction. One would be punishing Everton for what they've done, and then 2 is a deterrent to stop, someone else doing the same thing. I get how the appeal was successful, in that the Premier League, there was a lot of grey area on which financial things counted as part of your revenue tally and part of the the tally that they were judging on whether or not you could breach that tally. Based on Everton's calculations, they met, the tally that the Premier League had sort of put as a cap. Whereas from a Premier League's perspective, based on their calculations, they were adding certain things, maybe, COVID, for example, match day tickets was an exception that you didn't have to add it into your tally totals and stuff like that. So that grey area of which things counted, which didn't, is probably what helped Everton out in this case. But I'm looking at it from the perspective of, if Everton had used that money a bit more wisely, personally, I think it's kind of worth it. I don't know. If you use that money wisely and you only get a 6-point deduction, I mean, last season they got to stay in the Premier League, probably due to some of the business that they did. This season, I think they're fortunate that they're probably 3 teams worse than them in the league this season. So I think as a net, at the end of the day, 6 points isn't too much of a deterrent, I don't think.
No, I see where you're coming from with that, because, I think if you're buying the right players, 6 points really wouldn't be that much, even if you're only just hitting mid-table, you've then still got a base to build from then. So I see what you mean. It would be a viable way of doing things in that sense. So, yeah, I do wonder, when it comes to setting the precedent, whether they'd have been better being harsh or not. So it'll be interesting to see what else comes from this sort of thing with Forest. Obviously, they're under the cash for it, and I think their outcome will be seen in the next couple of months, where it's that'll be interesting to see what happens as well.
Yeah, and Everton obviously have another one looming as well. Maybe that factored in the fact that they've got 2, and that maybe they didn't want to be too harsh on the first one. But in terms of this specific game, I like your 1-0 scoreline. I really do. I think I might join you on that one, 1-0 to Everton. And as I said, if I'm confident in their defense, as confident as you can be in a team in a relegation battle, I'm confident in their defense, but compared to all the other teams around them, it's just about scoring the goals. And I think at home, hopefully the Goodison Park crowd can sort of drag one in with their voices. Let's move on to Fulham versus Brighton. I mean, Fulham had quite the day on Saturday, beating Man United, first time in, I think, over 100 years that they won at Old Trafford. For Brighton, we mentioned that Everton game, probably disappointing from them. They can't seem to get into a rhythm, James. It's a win here, a draw, a loss. Like, I can't remember the last time Brighton put back-to-back wins together. And I don't know if it's, the De Zerbi rumours, if it's the uncertainty with the backroom staff, because they seem to be a club that everyone's trying to poach as many of their players and staff as possible, considering how well they've done, to get into the Premier League, get into European football. They were, in my opinion, the best run club in the Premier League for the last at least 2 or 3 years. So maybe that stuff is starting to really wear on the club as a whole. And then for Fulham, as I said, just a phenomenal performance. Probably should have won it a lot more comfortably. They had chances to go and win that game a bit more comfortably. Invited Man United back into the game, only to sort of pull away the win at the end. What do you make for this one? This could be a sneaky good game.
Yeah, I agree. Especially Fulham at home, they can be really good on the day. They can get plenty of goals there, and I think, it's been really weird seeing Brighton this season. They've not looked bad, especially on the ball, but they can't seem to grind out those key wins when you need to. Like, from a Villa point of view, there's been games where we haven't looked great this season, but we're managing to grind out wins by a goal or so, and I think that is what keeps you up towards the top of the table, obviously. Whereas Brighton, especially with European football coming back soon for them, I think that they could be in danger of this season petering out if they can't find some sort of rhythm. If they can find some sort of rhythm now, it's a really good time for them to do that. But this will be a really tough game, and I think it could have quite a few goals in it. Fulham really were impressive against United, and I think that when they have players like Adama and Iwobi that can run into space, and United's lack of organisation defensively, I think that was was a perfect sort of game for them. Brighton do push up high as well, so they could, expose them in that sense again. So I'm going to go for a 2-2 with this one. I think it could be a really interesting game, and it'd be fun to watch.
That would be a fun game to watch. From my perspective, I think the slight difference that Fulham will face in the Brighton game to what they faced against United is Brighton will be happy to have the ball, whereas United almost seem like a team that's better suited to counter-attacking, and obviously Fulham went there trying to counter-attack, so it almost ended up resulting in a basketball type of game, especially towards the end of the game when both teams were trying to win it. But I think Brighton might have a lot more of the possession. It's going to be whether or not they can starve Fulham of enough possession that Fulham can't fashion enough chances, because we've seen with Fulham, and it's not just in the Man United game. If you look at recent games, I think the Carabao Cup semi-final against Liverpool, for example, where they have really good patterns of play going forward on the counter-attack, but they don't always, or they aren't always as clinical as maybe you'd want them to be, and that's been to their detriment this season. So I think they'll get chances. I agree there'll be space for them to operate with how high Brighton play, but I'm not convinced with their finishing quite yet. Obviously, they've got the likes of Jimenez and Breuer to come into this team, and probably that will help out from an efficiency perspective. But for now, I think I'm going to go 2-1 to Brighton. As we say, obviously, this won't be back-to-back wins again for Brighton. It will be a frustrating one, but hopefully then for them the next week they can try and get a win and try and get into some sort of rhythm, as you mentioned, prior to European football coming back. The next game is Newcastle versus Wolves. I mean, Newcastle, you looked at that game coming up against Arsenal. I think Newcastle of last season probably is what a lot of the pundits were talking about before the game, rather than what we've seen from Newcastle recently. So it tried to big the game up to a level that I don't think it ever really was, based on what we've seen from Newcastle this season. And from an Arsenal perspective, to me, they're the informed team in the Premier League at the moment. They can't seem to do anything wrong. My only question to you with them is, do you think they're peaking too early? I mean, it's March, or we're not even in March yet. It's February. They look hot, they look invincible, but we know where the business end is, where you need to really be on that run of form. It's just a question to throw out there and get your thoughts on that.
I think it's hard to say. I think they're playing like champions do. They're playing a bit like City do when they go on that motoring run of form towards the end of a season, but they have got the City game to come, and I think if they can keep this form up until then, and then manage to eke out a win against City as well, then you do wonder if they can go all the way and challenge Liverpool. Because even with the injuries coming in and out, I still think they're the team to beat. They find a way somehow all the time, and it's quite fascinating to watch. But yeah, with Arsenal, you still have that nagging feeling that there's going to be a game that sets them back, and I think that you're going to have that feeling about Arsenal until they overcome that. Until they actually do it, I feel like I always have that feeling they're going to slip up. Like last season, that I'd have never have seen that Southampton result coming at the Emirates. It was Southampton, wasn't it? Was it 3-3 draw? I wouldn't have seen that coming. Yeah. I still feel like that might still happen, but at the moment, the difference this season is they're so good out of possession, so good defensively, and with the set pieces that they're so good at as well. I feel like they're going to be very hard to stop, and they'll find it easy to stop most teams. So it is going to be fascinating to see how they're doing this running. It really will be.
Yeah, definitely one to keep an eye on. But yeah, in terms of this one, I know I mentioned that Fulham Brighton game could be sneaky good. I'm really looking forward to this Newcastle Wolves game because it's at St. James's Park. We know what atmosphere that crowd can sort of give games, and a lot of the good Newcastle games have been there this season. I know you don't want to talk about any games that were involved in it, against Newcastle this season. But playing a Wolves side who seem to be getting into a good run of form, they've got Neto back firing on all cylinders, in my opinion. I'm excited for this. I think Wolves sneak this one 2-1, but based on the basketball style of Newcastle of recent, and I think that's a lot to do with their inability to control games in midfield. That suits Wolves down to a T, because Wolves break with absolute pace, absolute precision, and I'm scared of if it ends up being Neto versus Burn on that side of the pitch. I don't know how that's going to end, but I don't think it will end well.
Yeah, this is a game for me where I can't see a draw. It's going to go one way or another for me, and I think if Newcastle turn up with the fans behind them and they have one of those really good performances, I think they can win this 2-0. But if Wolves turn up and Newcastle are a bit tentative from the start, this could be a perfect sort of game for Wolves and how they play. Neto's brilliant to watch. I love Joao Gomez as well in the middle. He's fantastic, and I think that they could really punish those spaces out wide. And as you say, Neto against Dan Burn would be, I'd feel sorry for Burn for 90 minutes. So trying to pick which way this is going to go, Wolves are in pretty good form. I could see Wolves 2-1 as well.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating watch, that one. Let's move on to the second last 3 o'clock kickoff for this weekend. It's Nottingham Forest versus Liverpool. Now, obviously, with these 3 o'clock kickoffs, we all know they're not available here in the UK. Fortunately for you, Luton versus Aston Villa is available, and we will get to that game. It's going to be on Sky Sports, but then again, it depends whether or not you have a Sky Sports package. But you don't need to worry about all of those calculations and different subscriptions if you link up with our presenting sponsors. Obviously, this podcast is presented by EPL Index in association with Liberty Shield. Liberty Shield is a great VPN service. It's very easy to install, really easy to use, and has a whole host of features. It can be used on multiple devices, whether you're traveling and you don't want to get locked out of your bank account, or if you want to stay safe while using public Wi-Fi. If you want to unlock geo-locked content, or you just want to protect your data, then Liberty Shield is definitely for you. One of my favorite uses of it is just unlocking content, being able to watch, for example, American sports for me is a big thing. So being able to watch all of those sports without worrying about how I'm going to get access to them if they're not being shown here in the UK. Liberty Shield is such a great tool. You guys, if you use the coupon code EPL25, you guys can save 25% off of either the router or the software VPN. And the software VPN obviously downloads straight onto your devices. Let's move on to Nottingham Forest versus Liverpool after paying the bills there for a little bit. What are your thoughts? Do Liverpool even have 11 players to feature in this game?
I'm not sure. I don't even think Klopp's sure whether he does or not. And it's not really not looking good on that front. But yeah, I'm not sure how close Nunes, Salah and Szoboszlai are to returning.
Well, Nunes jumped over the fence when Liverpool scored. So I don't know. I'm assuming he's close. I don't think he'd be doing that if he wasn't close. Then again, it's Darwin Nunes, so...
Yeah, I love him. I think he's great. But if they have 2 or 3 of those that are ready to come back in, then that would be really handy for them, obviously, because they can decide games whether you're conceding 1 or 2 still. They can outscore teams. So this could be a really good game at Forest. I'm not sure how Forest... I'd imagine they will try and hit them on the break, even at home, because, I think with the frailties that Liverpool might have, that'd probably be their best route. But yes, Liverpool's still the team to beat for me. A player that I'd have to pick out from the cup final as well, I thought he was brilliant, was Endo. I think he's such a good player. If he's starting, he can cover so much ground in that midfield and win the ball. I think he provides a good platform for the rest of the team to build on then. But it's mad going through this Liverpool injury list. It's almost reminiscent to a few seasons ago when they couldn't field a defence properly, really. Seems to happen quite a bit, and it's quite unfortunate because I think they're fantastic team to watch. And if I had all these players back, I do wonder how much further ahead they might be still. But yeah, it's going to be a tough game for both teams, but I'd still expect Liverpool to come out on top. I actually don't think it'll be too high scoring. I'll say 2-0 Liverpool.
2-0 to Liverpool. I've gone 3-1 to Liverpool. I'm still not confident yet giving them a clean sheet in the Premier League. You mentioned obviously the race for some of these players to be fit. I'd assume Darwin Núñez and Mo Salah were probably really close, and if they really wanted to push them and force them to play type of thing, I think they could have, but they sort of took the approach of we've got the rest of the season to look out for here. Let's go with what we have. I think Endo encapsulates what Klopp's sort of, I guess, career as a whole has been, which is taking players that you wouldn't necessarily highlight or pick out in a lineup of who you want to be starting for your team, and just elevating them and developing them and getting performances out of them that I don't think many other managers could. And it's similar to all the young kids that he had playing in that game. I don't know if many other managers would instill that much confidence that a team so young is confident enough to have the ball late in a game against Chelsea and the team they had out there. So yeah, I think credit to them for that. They've got an FA Cup game on Wednesday as well. I guess such is the poison chalice of going after every trophy that you're in is that you just end up playing a ridiculous amount of games in short space of time. But I would imagine it's Southampton that they're playing in the FA Cup. It will be a rotated squad. I'm assuming it's going to be a case of looking to see who has recovered from Saturday, who's back from injury, and that's the team that plays, and having confidence in the team to be able to navigate that game. And if they can get ahead and get ahead comfortably as quickly as possible, then wrap in cotton wool who you need to wrap in cotton wool, and you go again on the weekend. But the issue for Liverpool is because of the great form of Arsenal, because of how well Man City close, and we all know how well they close, Liverpool can't afford to even draw this game, I don't think. They have to go and win it. So I think there's going to be added emphasis to go and attack this game. I think also the last thing for me on that is just drawing on the fact that, as you've mentioned, somehow they find a way. I mean, even in that Luton game, to start the game off, they were down 1-0. They were struggling to get into a rhythm. They were wasting a lot of chances, and you thought, is this the game where they sort of just knock on the door and they don't get through, and all of a sudden you turn around and it's 4-1? I don't know how they're doing it, but somehow they're doing it. So I'm going to trust them to find a way to get through this game. But let's see if you can find a way to navigate bank it or burn it. But I'll give you a chance just to gather your thoughts, get ready for it. We'll be back with James for Bank It or Burn It after this short break. All right, we are back, James. Bank it or burn it. Now, look, obviously we've got international guests. We've got guests in and around the UK. Low-key, I'm hoping one of our guests that is based in the UK wins Bank It or Burn It, just for the sake of the budget of this podcast. But there are a few people across the pond that are very keen to get their hands on Bank It or Burn It and get that coveted trophy that comes with it. But how do you think you're going to fare on your first ever effort?
I'm not sure. When it comes to betting, I'm not 100% great at it. So my guesses will be just with the heart. So we'll go for it.
No, that's a good way to go. That's a good way to go. And look, at least the good thing is a lot of them are quirky bets as well in there. So I think that does level the playing field, whether it's the uber analytical or the ones that sort of go with the feel. I think it's a great equalizer. But let me just make sure that I've got that 15 seconds on the clock ready to go for your first round. But for those of you that are joining us for the first time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 15 seconds on the clock. James is going to try and answer all 5 questions for each of the 5 rounds before the 15 seconds runs out. I'll read out each question and he's going to shout bank it if he thinks the scenario will happen, or he'll shout burn it if he thinks the scenario won't happen. We start with Brentford versus Chelsea and we'll be going through all of the 5 fixtures we've just discussed. Are you ready to go?
Yep, 100%.
All right. We'll start with Brentford versus Chelsea. Your time starts now. Possession over 55% to the home team.
Burn it.
Over 8 shots on target.
We'll bank that one.
Over 20 tackles.
Burn that one.
Headed goal.
We'll bank it.
Knee slide goal celebration.
Got a good feeling about this one and I'll bank it.
Oh, just in time. Banked it just before the... Who did you have in mind when you were thinking of banking that? Was there a specific player you had in mind?
No, not really. I just feel like this might be a game where Chelsea will nick it in the last minute and there's just going to be knee slides everywhere. Brilliant.
Look, I've seen people trying to look at weather reports for the future and whether or not knee slides are going to come into it. I know if it's raining, it's kind of hard not to as a player.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see. With the way the weather's been in the UK, you might be onto something there. But let's move on to Goodison Park, Everton versus West Ham. Your time starts now. Possession over 55% to the home team.
We'll burn that one.
Over 8 shots on target.
Burn it.
Over 20 tackles.
Bank that one.
Headed goal.
Bank it.
Knee slide goal celebration.
We'll burn that one.
Oh. Alright, what did you predict for that one? We'll let the clock run out just so everything's above board. Oh, 1-0, fair enough.
Yeah.
The odds of... Okay. I think you'd be really unfortunate. There is a knee slide in a 1-0 game. That would just be cruel. Alright, let's move on to Fulham versus Brighton. I know you predicted 2-2 for that one, so we'll see how that factors into your predictions. Your time starts now. Possession over 55% to the home team.
Burn it.
Over 8 shots on target.
Bank that.
Over 20 tackles.
Burn it.
Headed goal.
Bank it.
Knee slide goal celebration.
We'll bank that one as well.
Bank that one to end it off. Alright. We're halfway through. How are you feeling? Oh, well over halfway through now.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about this one actually.
Yeah, it's not too bad. Once you get into the flow of it, it's not too bad. It's just whether or not we had I think 2 seasons ago we had to bring in the dubious goals panel to try and assess. I think it was a fist pump goal celebration that kind of was but wasn't, and the adjudicators had to come and decide whether or not to give the points to one of our guests. So I think knee slide is quite definitive. It's a knee slide or it's not. So hopefully that plays in your favour. But let's move on to Newcastle versus Wolves. Your time starts now. Possession over 55% to the home team.
Bank it.
Over 8 shots on target.
Burn it.
Over 20 tackles.
Bank it.
Headed goal.
Burn it.
Knee slide goal celebration.
Bank it again.
Bank it. Oh, all right. Quite a few banks it on the knee slides. 3 of the last 4. Okay, interesting.
I don't know why, but I'm seeing a Sean Longstaff knee slide.
Sure enough. He's been getting goals recently, hasn't he?
Yeah,
him and McTominay, I swear, are the same player.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. The final game: Nottingham Forest versus Liverpool. Your time starts now. Possession over 55% to the home team.
Burn it.
Over 8 shots on target.
Bank it.
Over 20 tackles.
Bank it.
Headed goal.
Burn it.
And knee slide goal celebration.
I'm going bank it again.
Bank it at the end. All right. You'll be praying for a lot of rain. I'm sure you'll be doing a rain dance prior to these 5 fixtures, and we'll see how you get on. And then obviously next week's show will reveal how our first 4 guests have done on Bank It or Burn It. Who's on top of the leaderboard? Who's maybe near the bottom and looking for redemption next time we do this, in when we get back to our guests. But let's move on to Spurs versus Crystal Palace, the last of the 3 o'clock games on Saturday. I mean, Spurs have had 2 weeks off. For some, it's a good thing. For some, it's not a good thing. I think Ange will use it as an opportunity to get on the training pitch really hone in the tactical approach, what he wants from his players. Hope some of those injured players can come back. I know they've had some wing-back issues in terms of injuries recently. If they can get one or two of those guys back, I think the 2 weeks would have been well used by Spurs from that perspective. And then obviously we've got Crystal Palace. They've got Oliver Glasner in there. He gets a win on his home debut, albeit against 10 men. But hey, a win's a win in the Premier League at the moment, especially if you're flirting with that relegation area. You take them any way they come.
Yeah, you do. It was a really important win, and I think this is going to be an interesting one because I don't think we're going to see too much of what Glasner's about still, because this is the sort of game where you would take a point out of it. I think you just want to be organised. I think they'll put on a good pressing display. I think I'm not sure what this could be, because Spurs, as you say, with a big break, it can do you good, it can do you bad. When we went through a rough spell in January, we had a couple of weeks off, and it really didn't help us. And with Palace playing recently and getting that much needed win, you wonder whether that's going to buoy them even more. So it could be an interesting game, but Spurs being at home, and you know how irresistible it can be at times, I'd probably still say it'd be a narrow Spurs win, a 2-1. Son double, but yeah, it's one of those games where I could see a slip up, but I don't think they will, and I would still back the Spurs home win.
Look, my better half will definitely thank you for the 2 Son goals there. She's a massive Son fan, but yeah, I think if I'm Crystal Palace, and it will be interesting to see if they sort of deploy this tactic, because Crystal Palace aren't really known for a team that will press quite high. But if I'm looking at that Spurs team and saying they've had 2 weeks off, we know they like to play from the back. Maybe there's a little bit of rust in there, like, passes might not be as crisp. If you press them from the back, we've seen Spurs make some mistakes playing out the back. Maybe you could capitalize on one or two of those errors and try and get a goal. But short of that, I do think Spurs' attack, the onslaught, the constant waves of attack that they like to build, I think especially at home, it's going to be too much for Crystal Palace this time around. So I've gone 2-0 to Spurs in this one. I've been quite stingy with the goal, and I know you've given it 2-1. I've gone 2-0. I think Spurs should be able to manage this game. I think it's the rest is going to be on the positive side for them. They're going to have been able to then now propel themselves for the rest of the season, secure that 4th place, try and look to see if they can get higher up in the table. I know you might be grimacing by me saying secure that 4th place, because we know where your team currently sits at the moment. But let's move on to the next game, and I brought them up because our next game is Luton versus Aston Villa. I'm going to hand the baton over to you. What are your thoughts on this one?
I think it's going to be a really, really tough game for us. We all know what Luton are like at home now. They will put up a good competitive display against anybody and everybody. Their problem obviously still is there's too many nearlies and not quite, and they can't always get over the line with a point or the 3 points. But there will be a tough test for us. We have struggled at times breaking down a team that can defend deep, but they won't just sit back for the whole 90 minutes. When they're at home, they put on a good display. And, I think watching the likes of Barkley and Lokonga recently, they look really good in the middle of the park. So they could cause us a few problems with their energy. But we look like we're getting back into our stride now. Considering the defensive injuries that we've got, losing Konsa and Kamara recently, we've settled on something that seems to be working well with Cash sort of sitting in like Konsa used to, and now Bailey sits out wide, and we've got that 4-man midfield of Tielemans, Ramsey, McGinn and Louise that sort of create that box, but there's so much energy and flair about them that they can pick apart teams. So I think that we're going to come out of it winning still. If results go our way the rest of this weekend as well, it could look really good in the Premier League table for us. So it's a must that we win this. I'm going to be quite positive about it, and I'll say that we win this 3-1. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Luton take the lead first again in this one.
Yeah, they've certainly made it tough to beat them, more so at home this season. We saw what Man United had to go through in that game. I think the issue, obviously, for Luton is the whole Elijah Adebayo injury and whether or not they can get him fit in time for this game. I know he's been ruled out for the game against Man City in the FA Cup, but if they can get him back against Aston Villa, I think that will be quite a key element for them, because he's been in really, really good form. My issue for Luton is we've seen how they perform in weeks where they've had to almost play 3 games, or however you calculate your week, whether it's the 3 games in 1 week or two games in 1 week with the midweek game in there. I don't know if they have a big enough squad to handle that. So facing Man City, we know they're going to be running around for all 90 minutes in that game, and to get anything from that game is going to take quite an effort. Then you come up against a very well-disciplined, very good tactician in Emery and Aston Villa. I think, with Aston Villa pushing right up, closing the pitch for you, making it quite claustrophobic. It's already a tight pitch as it is. I think it's going to be one game too far for them. I think it benefits Aston Villa that Luton play Man City midweek, because you assume they're going to play a relatively strong squad in that one and just won't have the squad depth to recover in time for Aston Villa. And if I'm Aston Villa, I'm looking to capitalize on these situations, because it's not always going to be like that in the Premier League. You're going to play teams that might be fresher than you in certain weeks. But this one, take the advantage, try and go and win this one comfortably. I've gone 3-0 to Aston Villa. I don't think Adebayo is going to get to be fit enough for this game, and that's going to be to Luton's detriment. That's why I've not given them that goal that you've very generously, I must say, have given them. I know they've been really good, but I just think it's going to be a big week for them, and I don't know if they're going to be able to handle Aston Villa, especially with how they're playing at the moment. Let's move on to Burnley versus Bournemouth. Burnley, they had obviously the 10 men against Crystal Palace last time. They put the ball in the back of the net, and even that got ruled out. I mean, everything just seems to be going wrong that can go wrong for Burnley at the moment. They're facing a Bournemouth side who were darlings of a lot of people in, certainly in the December, January time period, but they've cooled off somewhat. I still think they look good in games. They're just not getting the results that and things on. They're not swinging in their way. It's just not bouncing their way. If I can use a rugby ball term there, but I'm not worried about them and their they're potentially getting relegated. I think they'll be fine this season, but they do need to start picking up points, and you can't let a team like Burnley that is in that relegation zone to drag you down closer towards them. I think Bournemouth try and win this one. I've gone 2-0 to Bournemouth.
Yeah, I think my head's telling me 2-1 Bournemouth. I do think that Burnley, they just don't seem to have enough in them, unfortunately for them. I think they started off the season a bit too naively, and then I think it's sort of carried on momentum-wise with the poor results. And yeah, it's just not gone well for them. Whereas Bournemouth, they did have that really good purple patch mid-season time. And I agree. I still think when you watch them, they look really well drilled still. It's sometimes just that final pass or the finish. And I thought they looked pretty good against City. And they were not unlucky, but they gave a good showing, a good competitive showing. And I do expect them to come out with the 3 points again here, and it'd ease them a bit more again with eking closer to that safety points barrier that everyone wants to get over. 2-1 Bournemouth is what I'd go for. Yeah,
and on that safety points, I genuinely don't know if teams even need to get to 40 points this season. I think like 34 probably keeps you in the league. So a win here would take Bournemouth up to 31 points. They'll need just one more win from their remaining games, I think, and that should see them safe. I'm not expecting, as we look at the table right now, Luton, although they have a game in hand and, against most of the teams around them. They're sitting on 20 points. They're in that 18th spot. So if we give them that game in hand, if we, they'll be on 23 points. I still don't think they're going to get to 34. So yeah, if you can get 34, 35 points, I think Bournemouth will be fine this season, and a win here would certainly help that effort. Let's move on to what I'm assuming many will be calling their game of the week. Man City versus Man United. Man City, 2 consecutive 1-0 wins. They don't look like the Man City we're used to seeing, but they're still winning games, which is, I personally as a Liverpool fan, very annoying. Despite us being the team that just somehow finds a win when maybe we don't necessarily look like we're going to win certain games. But Man City, that's their bread and butter of just churning out wins. Irrespective of what's going on in and around them, they just churn wins, and 2 consecutive 1-0 wins. I think the thing for me is, despite those games both being 1-0s, we've seen a lot of Haaland chances that have gone begging, and he's not one of those players that's going to happen for too much longer. So I feel sorry for the team that he eventually does just pour out all his anger on. It could be Man United this weekend, because I'm not confident in this Man United side. I wasn't confident in them even when they had this run of form that they've recently had. In my opinion, I still think they could have easily lost some of those games that they did win, or even, definitely gotten at least a draw in those games that they won. They play well in 5, 10, 15-minute spells, maybe 20 minutes at a stretch, but I'm yet to see Man United put a whole half of football that I can be like, okay, that was a dominant display. They deserve to be ahead, or should be ahead, or I'm not convinced. Are you?
No, I haven't been for a while. It's been quite frustrating, especially, as I say, for me, that, obviously supporting Villa, wanting to keep pushing ahead of other teams, that it almost feels like they're getting away with such poor performances all the time and just managing to get those wins. But, unfortunately, that's just part of this chase. And I honestly still don't know what they're about other than transitions, just counter-attacking all the time, because that's when they look at their best. But when they're asked to control a game, they don't seem to be able to. And the spaces that they leave around is something that they can't do against City. They just can't. I think if they want to approach this game anyway, they would have to swallow the pride and look to just be counter-attacking, because this City team, even though they're, compared to the normal standards, they almost look a bit ordinary, which is strange to say. And I was saying to my dad as well the other day about how strange it is watching Haaland miss some of these chances that he'd have bagged easily last season. But he will get back into that swing of things, and he will be just banging him in again soon. And I think this really could be one of those games where he does find the same sort of form as he did last season. Being that he had, there is those games where United seem to rise to the occasion against City, but I don't see this game being one of them. I think City will win this 3-0.
3-0 on that one. Yeah, look, I know there's that age-old saying of, the form book goes out the window in derbies. I don't know if it really does too much. I mean, to me, a lot of the derbies aren't what they used to be. So the whole form out the window thing, no, I'm not buying it with this Man United team. I think they're going to have to do a lot better and be able to be in games for a lot longer and not be clumsy throughout the game. There's stages in matches where they genuinely can't string more than 2 or 3 passes together. You cannot do that against Man City. You just can't. And I think City probably are the best team in the world in terms of stopping counterattacks. They're so good at fouling players in transition and never seem to get a yellow card for it either. I mean, the amount of tackles to yellow cards ratio of Rodri is stuff of legends, if I'm being honest. I mean, Bernardo Silva had a couple the other day where I'm thinking, it's about 3 or 4 now that they just know how to slow down teams on the counter-attack. And then obviously, if that doesn't work, they've got Kyle Walker that will just sprint back. They're set up really well to to negate any counter-attacking football. And I think that will be well on display in this game in what will likely be a very frustrating game for Man United. I've gone 2-0 to Man City. I haven't gone as bullish as you have, but I am dreading making that prediction already, just thinking about Haaland is going to come good. And what better game to come good than in a Manchester derby? It's not looking promising for Man United in this one. But let's move on to another team that's probably going to be shaking in their boots in terms of goal difference. Sheffield United, they entertain Arsenal. Now, we saw with Sheffield United some frustration boiling over in their game against Wolves on Sunday. I think it was Sosa and Robinson that got in a bit of a scuffle. So much so that VAR got involved, which I thought was absolutely comical. Could you imagine your team getting a red card, because of your two players that have fought? I think Newcastle were in that situation a couple of seasons ago. Yeah,
I remember growing up that Newcastle game where Lee Bowyer and Dyer were at each other. That was against Villa. That was as well. It's always strange to see. In fact, when the season we only just about stayed up a few years ago, Mings and El Ghazi were, not headbutting each other, but they were at each other trying to defend a corner. I think you can see this quite often in struggling teams, but it depends how you look at it, doesn't it? Like, yeah, it's sort of showing that they care, but at the same time, isn't the best placed way of showing that. So I think it's really strange to see, because even though it's just basically friends disagreeing, it's because of the coverage that it gets. It's just so odd to see in front of obviously thousands of people, but they are just human.
And the thing is, these scuffles do happen behind closed doors as well. Yeah. It's just we don't get to see them a lot. I remember a couple of seasons ago when Mohamed Salah and Sadio Mane were sort of shouting at each other because one didn't pass or should have passed or whatever the case may be. And, Liverpool fans were up in arms, and like, oh my God, one of them is going to have to be sold. Which one do you... And I'm like, guys, the amount of times these players have had, these type of conversations in the dressing rooms, we just don't see it. It just so happened that this one was out on the pitch. I'm sure it's something that will be sorted out, will be resolved. And then from a Sheffield United standpoint, it's just evident that they don't have what they needed to have in order to stay in the Premier League this season, unfortunately for them. Even with the new manager coming in, a new old manager coming in, it doesn't seem like their fortunes have changed all too much. Is there any chance of a banana skin in this one? I mean, Arsenal, as I said, probably the informed team in the Premier League at the moment. I don't think anyone would bet against them winning this one, which makes me have to ask, could it be a banana skin?
Well, I was only saying this about half an hour ago, wasn't I, that Southampton result last season, where you don't expect it because you think it's a foregone conclusion that Arsenal are going to turn up and do the business. As much as it could be one of those, I don't see it. I do think it's a slightly different Arsenal this season, particularly defensively, as I say. So I think for Sheffield United, it might be a damage limitation job because of how good Arsenal can be at the moment. They're scoring goals for fun. I think they've won how many in a row now. I can't see anything other than an Arsenal win, and I could see more and more goals come in again. A 3-0 Arsenal win is what I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty solid scoreline. I think for Sheffield United, they maybe would have been hoping this game was, in 2 weeks' time instead of next weekend, because Arsenal then have the Champions League game that following midweek, where we know they're behind in that one. Maybe then you could say they might have one eye on that game and you can try and win it that way. But it's going to be a tough game for them. If I'm Sheffield United, my goal for this game, obviously there's the whole trying to keep the scoreline respectable. But for me, the goal is don't concede a set piece.
Yeah.
Do not concede. Arsenal have 18, if not 19 by now, set piece goals this season. Let's make a concerted effort that if they're going to beat us, let it not be via the set piece goal, especially with how many times Arsenal's first goal in games is a set piece goal. And that just, it changes the game, because then Arsenal don't have to force it. They can sort of exploit your weaknesses when you're coming to chase the game. If I'm Sheffield United, just do not concede from a set piece. But my second concern would be try not to have fans walking out, 20 minutes into the game, like what happened last time they were at home. It's a sad thing to see for any football club. They're not performing well. Maybe unless, if Sheffield United are your rivals or a team you don't like. But yeah, I think for this one, I'm going to play it safe. I don't think Sheffield United are going to cause Arsenal too many problems. I've gone 4-0 because Arsenal just seem to score 4 goals in every game at the moment. And we'll see how that one goes. But that's going to do it for another episode of A Tad Predictable. James, do you have anything you want to plug, put over, promote before we wrap up?
Just as usual, the podcast that I'm a co-host on, the IBFC Faithful podcast. We've been a bit hit and miss this past couple of weeks with illnesses and new jobs between us, but we're back on it from this Friday. So yeah, go and give us a follow, give us a listen. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, thingy. You know what I mean? I've lost my train of thought now, but yeah,
music, all of them.
Yeah, and Twitter as well. So yeah, go and head over and follow us.
Definitely go do that, guys. From my end, go check out all of the content on EPL Index website. You can stay up to date with all of the news that's happening in the Premier League. Obviously, some articles on there regarding the Everton appeal and the points deduction that's been reduced down to 6 points. Of course, there is the daily podcast show. It's the Two Footer podcast where Dave Hendrick discusses all the hot topics in football. Also, go check out the flagship show that runs weekly. It's the EPL Roundtable, where Kev DeVries sits down with panelists from respective EPL teams. They do the reviewing of the EPL weekend. We obviously do the previewing. I'm going to be on that show next week, I believe, as well. So yeah, definitely go check that out. Usually comes out Sunday night, if not Monday mornings. Go and follow at A Tad Predictable on the app formerly known as Twitter. Go and follow at EPL Index on that same app. Subscribe to EPL Index podcast channel on your podcast providers. Give us 5 stars. Write positive comments. All of that stuff really does help us out. As James has said as well, definitely do it for his podcast. I'm sure he will appreciate the sentiment. I've been Tadiwa Chinakira. You can find me on the Twitter handle Tad Predicts. Huge thank you to Obi Semenya. He's at John Empire SA, and Jodie, she's at Spursy141 for our guest intros. Mr. Guy Drinkle, he's at Guy Drinkle on Twitter. He's obviously executive producer for this show, so huge thank you to all the work he does behind the scenes. He's been James. He's at The Holt 1874 on Twitter. And remember, Chisinga Perry, Chinoshura.
What a strike from Yuri Tielemans.
De Bruyne! And it's what Martinelli gorgeous. Still going up. Oh, he's done it again. And City have won the Premier League.
Sports Social Podcast Network.